Alrighty, how you guys doing? Fantastic. This is our session 7, and which gonna be the last sessions of our launch meeting before you guys gonna take the first sessions in this December. So today is more like a wrap up, but still I am including a topic here, which is a binary search, which is very basics, but still worth the time. We're going through from very fundamentally physical meaning behind binary search and also the use cases. And the second is let's quickly go through, very routine stuff while you are preparing for USACO, but also very routine stuff when you guys taking exam. For example, how to join the sessions. For example, um, areas you kind of worry about, especially for the brown people, the first time taking the exam. So let's quickly walk through that, and then I'm I'm pretty confident that you guys should deliver with our sessions, and also assuming you guys taking enough time offline practicing and prepare for the December session. All right. So talking about the binary search, I want to talk about the binary search in several different flavors. So binary search, you need to understand, is a searching algorithm, right? This algorithm is mostly go against with the so-called brute force, which is sequential. Sequential search is no matter what algorithm I'm going to consider, I'm just go ahead and flip the number one by one and check against it. That's a sequential search. So binary search, so sequential search, no matter what, going to linear time, which is O of n, which is very basic, but is not very effective. So as we talk about binary search. So binary search is, we're going to using log n time to deliver the searching. So one of the requirement, those very basic, I still want to remind people that before you're using binary search, making sure your data should take certain pattern. I'm using the word pattern, not necessarily you just think ascending order, descending order, not necessarily. It should take certain pattern. For example, it could be like a pivot, going up and going down, or going down and going up, right? Or all the way up or all the way down. So that's called pattern. And based on the pattern, you can uniquely define or determine the relative order of the number of target versus number you're looking at. Mostly the number we are looking at is defined in middle number. Of left and right? So the physical meaning of left and right is a range of the numbers you haven't checked yet, right? So that's why for binary search, you threw out half of the data for each iterations. And so your left and right scope is cut to half, one, gradually until you hit the base case. And then you can do the, post-checking. So that's the mechanism in general and also requirement behind binary search. All right, that's the first layer. The second layer, let's talk about the use case. Use case in light of use case mostly coming to two flavors. One is literally, right? Deliver me, hey, what is the target number? What's index in that ascending, numbers in that array? So this pretty much is on the number level. The second is called a function level. I believe if you take my server classes, we practice a lot about the binary search questions, right? Using the same word, if you can define this is a binary search problem, all the rest is washing the bottles, specifically for server. So for function level, it's going to be same pattern that behind the function. That is, if you can tell me for this function fi, where the I is greater than a number, so you can be sure that you can be sure that you can find, you can define the range of the index in the other half. So essentially it's same as the number level by comparing the middle number versus target number. But for function wise, it's basically checking the response of a certain inputs and versus the target, so that you can well define the next range of the I. It's gonna be same, right? So that's it. Number level, function level. That's all about behind the binary search and possible use cases for server and potentially for bronze. Mostly binary search is going to happen for server, but not necessarily you can exclude for your binary, for your bronze level, right? The third layer I want to talk is about implementations. Overall, binary search algorithm is pretty much very simple, but for implementations, if you take my class, you understand there's several corner cases where it may induce infinite loop, right? It never come out, or you may, potentially missing a data. So criteria of effective implementation of binary search, including two. Number one, you do not lose, you do not miss the candidates while you scope down the left and right. The second is you do not creating an infinite loop. As to the use cases behind the infinite loop, we talk on both bronze and server level. Hopefully Stu can jog a memory on for that. Now, let's talk about the implementation. So I using the word is narrow down left and right plus post checking. So that is kind of template, even though I kind of hate any level of template, but for binary search, so please you can just go ahead and follow the while plus post checking, try to avoid potential infinite loop and avoid a potentially missing the data. So implementation would be while left plus for one, left and right? And inside of it is gonna be, compare made versus target, and go ahead and narrow down to, and then either move the left or right pointers relative to the mid. As to here, you're gonna think is whether you're gonna mid plus by one or mid minus by one. So that is question context dependent. You can be aggressive, but you cannot miss the potential data, right? We also practice a lot for these points. So also the versatile time to recap this portion as well. And when you exit out this while loop, so you pretty much have your left pointer plus by one equals the right pointers. What does that mean? That means potentially the candidate is going to come in from either left, either coming from your left or right, or none of them. So the post tracking here is you literally grab these three cases. Which case? You're gonna return the left, or you're gonna return the right, or you're gonna return some special value, which means, you know what, nothing happens. There's no targets that can be found in left or right. So this is a post tracking. All right. Hopefully this is sound very familiar to you because we practiced many times. So this is an implementation of binary search, and with this you can avoid infinite loop. So most infinite loop is when your left is adjacent to the right, the next is right, and then somehow your algorithm is keep putting the left to the mid. I mean, the mid is always pointing to the left if your left plus by one equals right. So that will increase infinite loop. So given that reasons, you can just add by one, left and right. So just stop when your left plus one equals right. So that can avoid infinite loop. All right. So that being said, that's about the binary search. Is walk through. It's very simple, straightforward, but simple algorithm doesn't mean it's a low-hanging fruit. You had to implement well and also consider all the corner cases as possible. All right. So with that, including a question, which is like binary search of 101. If you guys can still recall, you have a sorted array, right? For this case, integer array. And then you have a targets and asking you, hey, if the targets exist, please return its index. If it doesn't exist, just return minus by one. And here there's also a restriction, make the question easy level. So here's, all numbers are unique, right? And it ends within the integer representation by 32 bits, and all other kind of stuff is very basics. So not a big deal for these questions, but still again, we can show that implementation. But that also reminds us, if we can go back, all more detailed cases behind number levels. So the first one, as I just showed, just asking you, hey, target exist, right? The second would be return the index, or either, smallest or largest index of a target in array, because there's duplications, right? Or that could be return largest number that is less than the targets. Familiar with that? We talk actually every single use case is included in our lecture sessions. 1.4, for example, find the pivot in, for example, ascending to descending pattern, or reverse way. Find the pivot from descending and ascending pattern, whatever, right? So this easily we can see derivatives from a number level binary search implementations. So you should deliver. That's why it's important for you to crystal understand the physical meaning for left and right, and how you're going to move the pointers as accordingly, in lights of not to be very aggressive to missing any data, or you do not want to get into infinite loop, right? So clearly for that question, is it just a 101, 1.1 target existing arrays, right? So with that, I think it really not really worth the time to implement out. Is the same thing as I showed that like the template. Go ahead and play with it, right? 704 binary search, very simple questions. You can go ahead and check your while plus post checking well, and run that. And by the way, I got a question from student regarding whether or not you should employ LeetCode for your preparation. My answer is no, because you got 1,600 questions from LeetCode unless your instructor can effectively define the scope for your level. I would recommend you not doing that, but for instead focus on our lecture component levels and actual USACO questions, right? As overall, the structure, you have to be very efficiently to translate the problem from USACO level down to component level. So LeetCode mostly is component levels. But given there's so many questions, you don't have to throw yourself into, even though some questions already have a label, they tag, for example, graph, 2 pointers, sliding window, greedy, whatever, but still quite a lot of problems. So using time, effectively. And in my survey sessions, I grouped several questions from exam for component level LeetCode wise questions, and people can go ahead and play with that because that's well defined. Other than that, especially for bronze, it's really unnecessary you taking LeetCode for component question practicing. You can just focus on the lecture materials. And for people who do not take my sessions for bronze, you can talk to me offline. Hopefully I can, scope down questions for our practice. All right. So with that being said, that is a binary search, and a binary search, how that works, and use cases you can expect, and areas you should be careful about. All right. Now going back to the second portion for this meet, you will have the first sessions. I think I published the date. So your first session is December 18 to 21st, and over this windows, okay, first things, you had to set up the count. I believe everybody who already took my session already set up the count, because we keep using the actual USACO questions for a practice. Suppose they already have the account. And then it's gonna be very self-descriptive. In that sessions, in that windows of that days, if you log in, you will see a very self-descriptive way So you can just go ahead and join the sessions. Remember, this is a continuously hours, 4 hours contest. So you had to be focusing on over that slot. That's why you had to schedule the time as accordingly and find the slot of 4 hours, for example, over that day, a specific day you feel very comfortable with to join the test. As to the other details, this has been mentioned in our session, but it worth the time. Let's talk one more time again. You will have the first user case detail available. Hopefully people understand what I'm talking. That one, you can see exactly what's inputs. That's pretty much is the example case from the questions. So you're going to test on the first one. So before you submit it, making sure in your environment, checking against that case, making sure you got correct answers. Of course, there should be no compiling errors or any kind of stuff. Otherwise, you will not get any answers. So making sure you pass over that, and then go ahead and submit the file checking the others. Though you do not have the details of the user cases for the rest, but you can see the error message if you do not pass it. If you pass it, it's going to show the green bar with the performance, the time, and the space. But if not, you're going to see the message, which also worth the time for you to debug your code. For example, you have a label such as time limits, for example, and for that time limits, you're going to see a T, right? Time limits exceeded, and then you're going to go ahead and figure out either any infinite loop. I mean, for bronze, mostly the use cases people understand is not scaling up like silver or even higher level. So if you really have the T, showing up there, you really want to check in maybe some, looping, creating infinite loop, or some logic creating something like a deadlock. It never can come out, right? So that's one. Or you got logic error. Logic error is the it can run as coded, but it just got a wrong answer. It just give you an X, which is wrong answers. You're gonna check in the logics and see whether or not it's what you want. And also there's a routine as read input file and write to output file. And the output file gonna be the file. You're gonna submit it for the check. So if you have a file related problem, you can see like E, for example, the file is null or empty. So that can also very routine stuff can remind you to check over that. All right. So with that being said, the routine and protocol to join the session is very straightforward and self-descriptive. I'm not worried too much about that. So I assume everybody scheduled to taking the first sessions, which is 2 weeks away. So still my recommendation is you should involve with more USACO level questions. You can still taking the questions in my sessions as practicing, and while you can expand the scope by looking the recent 5 years specifically to test it. And meanwhile, I want people to still, while you guys doing that, still in parallel, so still practicing component level questions is specifically scoped in our lecture sessions and for categorized topics, because that's important for the implementations. Even though you know what that is about for algorithm or data structure, if you got a wrong implementation, still you got a wrong answers, and each use case take the same weight. So that's why at the end of the day, how many use cases you can pass, that define how closer you can pass for this level, right? All right. So other questions is about the US Open. US Open is, you see that every year you have a 3 regular session plus 1 US Open. US Open, generally is more difficult than the other 3 regular sessions because US Open is the sessions uh, as a data point to be considered to promote it for the summer for the training camp. So the criteria is heavily relies on the U.S. Open performance and your regular session, but mostly it's from U.S. Open. So that's why, depending on your scope, if your scope is just trying to pass in this given level, want to be promoted in the next level, so on and so forth, and you should focus on the regular sessions. If you do not do well, you can take in next January one. If not, then February. So there's no limits as to how many times you can take it. Uh, but if you scope to even higher, you can prepare it while you're passing the bronze or silver. You can still, taking the U.S. Open. It's still open for everybody. And prior to that, you may want to again practicing with the US Open level questions. And for my server classes, we already practicing US Open level questions, but you can involve more questions while still, practicing the material in our sessions. All right. So I think it's rather straightforward and clear. I think the remaining time you guys should focus on, as what I said, as implementations by component level questions, making sure it's literally proficient to deliver that bug free. The second is also please practicing your debugging skills. We show that how to add breakpoints and how to check against the intermediate results versus your logics, whether or not implementation is implemented well, right? So don't forget practicing over that part, because a decent amount of time in the context, you're literally gonna debug. I mean, mostly nobody gonna pass on all the 10 or 12 use cases for the first submission, right? You can, based upon the message, you can go ahead and debug, all right? And also, this is for people who actually can, actually for everybody, you can create your own cases. Uh, let's say if you pass in the example case, but somehow you're missing all the rest or several, some of them, and you debug your logics and also the flow implementation, but still have no clue. And then the other thing you can do before you move on is creating user cases on your own. For example, corner cases and very special cases with inputs, right? And go ahead and check in results whether or not is what you want. This is very specifically for bronze levels, where the user case is still within, it's a low, it's still low level use cases. It's not as much as the server level. Specific for the last several use cases is exponentially growing up. So that make it really hard for debugging over that, quantity or that level. But for bronze, it's still very helpful, making sure you don't miss any corner cases or very special inputs, um, uh, so as you can pass on the use cases. All right. Last one is um, if you can pass all the use cases for your given levels, automatically you can have another 4 hours being offered for you to take in for the next level. So that's one option for people, specifically for bronze, right? For bronze people, right? If you can pass all the use cases 100%, and then you get the 4 hours in this given session to challenge for next levels. If else you are not passing the user cases, in very perfect fashions, then you had to wait until the end of the sessions, and then people are going to run a chart and check your percentile. If you are fortunate to pass it, given the percentile, then you're going to be promoted for the next level. So you got a chance for next sessions to challenge for the higher level. All right, so this is pretty much very routine stuff. So with that being said, I really want to wrap it up and um, to leave more time to you guys to continue the component levels and also the USACO levels practicing. So one more time again, so 3 portions. Number 1, component level practicing based upon the component level questions included, especially in our lecture sessions. Number 2, translations. And this is a heavily in our coding sessions as to giving a USACO level questions, how would you translate down to component levels? Number 3, implementation, debugging. All right, making sure at least you know how to debug, right? You don't want to just spend 2 hours without knowing doing anything. So practicing, don't forget the third portion as well. All right. So with that being said, this is really a long commitment with you folks since, let's say, May of last year, right? I'm sorry, May of this year. It's been a while. So we should reflect our, significant effort into something we are going to be proud of. So with that being said, still going to stay in touch. People know my contacts. And if you have any questions offline or concern or anything related, you guys are welcome to contact me. All right. And with that being said, this is the end of the 7 sessions launch meetings. And this is special year, but we are lucky still can talk over the line and appreciate it. So with that being said, any question? Alrighty. So good luck. And I see you guys. Okay, let me check. All right. With that being said, people, sooner or later we're gonna talk again. Bye-bye.